The heels clattered sharply against the elegant white marble, but they couldn't drown out the whisper filled with disdain that hung over the table. Clara, wearing her modest and worn dress, held the menu in trembling hands, feeling the piercing gazes cut through her like invisible blades. Tonight, she had dreamed of a small respite, a moment for herself away from endless days of work and sacrifice, but nothing seemed willing to give her a break. The maitre d', a woman with a towering posture and a hard look, approached once again and with a forced and fake smile simply whispered, "I'm sorry, miss, but we can't serve you dressed like that here." It was as if the air grew heavier, a kind of invisible bubble isolating her from the entire world. She lowered her eyes, holding back the tears that threatened to spill over, while the true reaction to her presence began to stir among the other tables. Low comments, stifled giggles, and those kinds of looks that only hurt because they strip away any dignity outside an imposed standard. Clara took a step back, her heart pounding fiercely and sadly against her ribs. Frustrated and wounded, she decided it wasn't worth facing that cloud of hypocrisy. She turned on her heels, ready to leave behind that reality that silently told her she had no place in certain spaces. But just as she crossed the door, the murmurs stopped and time seemed to freeze. In front of her, on the street barely lit by the restaurant's golden lights, was a luxury car waiting. The door opened slowly, and a man of impeccable presence stepped out to offer her a hand with a smile that seemed to hide secrets. That scene shattered all the molds Clara believed unbreakable. The humble girl rejected for not fitting in was now the protagonist of a new chapter no one expected. But who was this man waiting for her? Why had he chosen her and not another? And what story did the shiny car conceal that promised a different destiny from the one Clara had known until now? That night, the simple dress was not just an obstacle, but the spark that ignited a sequence of events that would change her life forever. Clara took the outstretched hand, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't yet know that this choice would shake the orderly and stratified world she had lived in. What began as a simple ruined date was about to become an adventure that would dismantle prejudices, family secrets, and hidden truths beneath the facade of high society. But before she could think about all that, the man looked at her with an intensity that chilled her blood and warmed her soul simultaneously. "Ready for a real change?" he asked in a low voice, as if they shared a secret code known only to the two of them. Her answer was uncertain, but that uncertainty pulsed with an irresistible force. Clara knew there was something more behind that invitation than a simple ride, something that would take her far beyond rejection and pain. And for the first time in a long while, she was willing to risk everything. The restaurant was left behind, with its judgments, its glances, and indifference. That night, a door opened for Clara to mystery, revelation, a world where her worth wouldn't be measured by her clothes or her origins. What no one imagined was that the door was not only opening for her, but it was also about to shake the foundations of the very place that had rejected her. With a shy smile, Clara stepped into the car, feeling the weight of so many years lighten in a matter of seconds. Outside, the city seemed like a stage that no longer contained her. And inside, as the engine roared, something deep and powerful began to awaken. A story had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Who was that mysterious man? What role did the luxury car play in Clara's destiny? And what secrets lurked in that exclusive world that had denied her? Each question wove itself into Clara's mind, and every answer was a new step toward a destiny that both she and the spectator were about to explore. The journey was just beginning, and with every mile traveled, hope competed with doubt. But one thing was clear: Clara would never be the same after crossing that door. The night was full of possibilities, and the sparkle in her eyes reflected that she was ready to face them all, no matter what came. The story of the humble girl who dared to dream beyond appearances, who defied ignorance and exclusion, was there, waiting to be told. Perhaps the time had come to see what lies beyond the veil, to break prejudices and accept that true stories always hide much more than meets the eye. The street now was a different stage, with a car seeming to start at every beat of Clara's heart. Where would it take her? What revelations awaited at that destination? The questions multiplied, but Clara had only one certainty: She was ready to discover the truth, no matter the cost. And as the car drove away beneath the night sky full of promises and mystery, one thing was certain. The story that began with rejection because of her clothes was about to unleash a whirlwind of emotions, hidden truths, and unforgettable twists. Because sometimes a single moment can change everything. And this time it would change everything forever. She arrived at the restaurant hoping to spend a different kind of night. She didn't expect for even a second that the door would literally be slammed in her face, nor that a waitress would throw her a look full of disdain, judging her worn jeans and the modest blouse she was wearing. "Your attire is not appropriate for this place," the woman said sharply, almost as if she had to apologize for having to say it. The humiliation was immediate and deep. Her cheeks flushed, and she felt all eyes on her, judging her, condemning her. She turned around without a word, her heart broken and her pride in shreds. But just when she thought the night would end in sadness, something unexpected awaited her outside. Upon leaving the restaurant, before her eyes appeared a luxury car shining under the streetlights. A vehicle that no place she came from could dream of owning. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Her dressed plainly, lowering her head in shame, and that imposing car that seemed taken from another reality. But this car was not empty. Someone awaited her inside. On the other side of the door was an important person who would change the entire course of that night and, perhaps, her life completely. We tell this story because it tastes like truth, because we have witnessed how appearance can close the doors to anyone. And also to show that behind every snub there is a much more complex story, with twists no one expects. No one in that restaurant could imagine who the young woman who had tried to enter really was, or what fate awaited her. They didn't know that humble girl was about to turn everything around with a surprise no one saw coming. The restaurant was the most exclusive in the city, a place where every detail was designed to impress and differentiate its regular, wealthy, and powerful clients. The dim lights, velvet chairs, the subtle aroma of delicate dishes, every element told a story of sophistication. For someone like her, accustomed to the simplicity of the neighborhood, that world seemed unreachable. But it was not out of desire or whim that she had come there. She had a dream, a secret appointment that no one should know about yet, and a reason to try to enter. She had worked for months, saving every possible peso to buy a dress, to dress up a bit and present herself in front of that restaurant with a touch of confidence. She knew she didn't fit in, but the hope of what could happen made her try. And when the door was closed without mercy, the blow was so strong it made her stagger. However, just when she thought it was all over, a shadow appeared near the vehicle that looked like it had been taken from a movie. The tension of the moment grew with every second passing under the weight of rejection. That black car, as dark as the night, slowly began to open its door, and a figure emerged with an elegance that did not match the image many had of that girl. Who was she really? How was she connected to this car? And above all, why did no one in the restaurant seem prepared for that surprise? As the young woman approached trembling, the person dressed in an impeccable suit smiled and said, "You should never have to feel that this world rejects you because of how you dress." The warmth in his voice contrasted with the coldness of the treatment she had received inside. That phrase was not only a comfort, it was the key that unlocked a hidden story from the public, a barely hinted but powerful and real connection. The truth, which no one yet knows deeply, is that this young woman was not who the people in the restaurant assumed. In fact, there were family secrets that linked her directly to that world of luxury and exclusivity. Her humble clothes were a self-imposed barrier, a shield to protect herself from a past she preferred to keep at a distance. But that night, with the door slammed in her face, that barrier was about to fall. Every step she took toward the car was a step toward the discovery of a truth that would shake everyone's perception. Not only because of who awaited her, but also because of what that meeting meant. A reconciliation, a delayed justice, and perhaps the beginning of a new stage in her life after having endured so much. The story makes sense when we remember that sometimes rejection is nothing more than a curtain that hides realities we are not ready to face. The disdainful look of those who chose to judge her clothing was not just superficial. It revealed ignorance and fear of the different. But life, with its extraordinary sense of humor, chose a perfect moment to deliver poetic justice and turn the story around like in the best movies. The mystery grows because no one saw coming what was about to happen with this young woman and that car. Was it chance, a coincidence? Far from it. In reality, that night would test all the characters involved, from the restaurant manager to the regular guests who never imagined their prejudices would have immediate and visible consequences. Beyond the personal drama, this scene holds a sharp critique of the unwritten rules of luxury and social exclusion. It's as if that restaurant, with all its glass and impeccable art, was a fortress the poor, sunburned world was not allowed to cross. But then, who decides who deserves to be treated with respect and who does not? On what criteria is their discrimination based? Each answer invites questioning that system. What made sense until that moment? The long table, the white linens, and the crystal glasses crumbled in seconds when the car turned on its lights and a new chapter began to be written. The humble young woman, unable to accept rejection, found outside an unexpected opportunity, a secret door inviting her into a universe that till minutes ago seemed forbidden. With a deep sigh, she got into the vehicle, still looking back, imagining how to tell those who had judged her the true story behind that scene. Because now she was not just a woman with dreams, but a woman with a revealed destiny. And the city, with its cold asphalt, was now witness to something much more powerful than appearances: the strength of being authentic despite everything. When the car doors closed, the echo of voices inside the restaurant lingered in the air. There was an expectant silence, a question floating. What is behind that young woman? Who was the man accompanying her? And what would change in their lives after that night? The answer was too close to ignore, and much closer to surprise everyone. The exact moment the car drove off and the figure vanished down the dark avenue was the instant that marked a before and after. Because appearances, those that often deceive, had been put in check. And what seemed a simple act of discrimination ended up being the beginning of a much deeper story, loaded with secrets, hopes, and unexpected twists. No one could imagine that young woman, who seemed so alone and vulnerable at the entrance of the restaurant, had a life intertwined with the destiny of the city's most exclusive place. In fact, her humble origins and constant struggle were only the surface of a truth about to explode in everyone's face. Every line of the script written from this scene will be filled with mixed emotions. There is fear, yes, but also a hope growing strong. Because when she decides not to give up, when she accepts the hand offered to her, the path opens to change not only her own story but also the rules of that world that had so despised her. The restaurant, its lights slowly fading, was left behind as a symbol of what could neither contain nor define this girl. While the luxury car, bright and shining in the gloom, became a beacon illuminating that new reality. The story, just beginning, invites us to follow every step with hearts on edge, because the truth is about to be revealed in ways no one imagines. It is not just about rejection or an expensive car. It is about a clash of worlds, dreams versus prejudices, and how one person's courage can dismantle the toughest barriers. And while the street remains silent, fate continues its course, guiding us toward the next surprise that will make this story unforgettable. Just when Marta thought the humiliation couldn't get any worse, she felt the gaze of everyone in the restaurant piercing her with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. The waitress, with a fake smile, pointed to the door with a sharp gesture, barely disguising the irony. "We don't have a place for you here," she said bluntly. At that moment, the noise of the elegant conversations and soft music became a distant murmur for Marta. Her chest tightened. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, but nothing came out of her mouth except a quiet whisper. "All right, I'm leaving." Each step she took towards the exit hurt more than she expected. Outside, the fresh breeze hit her face. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the knot tightening her throat. Marta had dreamed for years about that moment, walking through the doors of that exclusive restaurant, even if only to feel she belonged to that world. But reality had brutally put her in her place. People at the entrance looked at her, some with pity disguised as indifference. Others simply ignored her, as if she were invisible. But it didn't matter. She wasn't going to let this night end in defeat. As she walked towards the corner, thinking about how to get home without anyone waiting for her, something caught her attention. The shine of a gleaming car stopped her dead in her tracks. It was imposing, black, with elegant lines and an engine that seemed to purr with power, as if it controlled the night itself. And there, standing next to the vehicle, was someone she never expected to see. Her heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be him. Why? Their eyes met, and in that instant everything changed. The smile he gave her was harsh, but in his eyes there was a different glow, a mix of pride and concern, as if he wanted to protect her from something while at the same time showing her off to the world. Marta didn't hesitate. She crossed the street with firm steps, her insecurities displaced by a torrent of emotions. Who would have imagined that this impeccably dressed man, known for his fame and fortune, was waiting for her? Getting into the luxury car, Marta felt her story beginning anew, but this time with an unexpected twist. Only nothing is that simple. As the vehicle started smoothly, Marta caught a whisper behind her. Who is that? She doesn't seem from here. What's she doing with him? The question echoed through the night like a persistent refrain. That only increased the tension. What secrets did that connection hide? And more importantly, what did it mean for her, for him, and for everyone watching them? The silence inside the car was uncomfortable at first. Marta looked out the window, trying to sort her thoughts. He, lost in his world, seemed calculating and lost at the same time. Finally, he broke the silence with a deep voice. It wasn't by chance that I saw you in there. Marta looked at him, confused. So? She asked cautiously. I knew you didn't fit in. But I needed you to see this. What you are, what you could become. His gaze left no room for argument. Marta felt a chill. The evening had just begun. Who was this man and what did he want from her? Why that mixture of disdain and fascination he emitted? In every word of his there was a double meaning Marta couldn't decipher. But one thing was clear. The story wasn't going to be what she had imagined when she left that door. On the contrary, she was entering a much bigger game, where luxury, appearance, and the past clashed in a devastating way. As the car moved under the city lights, questions Marta had buried resurfaced. Was it really possible to change her destiny? Could someone from the world that had rejected her give her a sincere chance? And most unsettling, what did he have to do with all this? The mystery deepened, and with every kilometer they traveled, Marta understood that nothing would ever be the same that night. But the man was not there for easy conversations. His phone vibrated insistently. He looked at the screen, frowned, and turned off the device. He turned to Marta and said sternly, "Don't think this is a game. There are people looking for you, and not all of them are kind." Marta swallowed hard. Uncertainty enveloped her. Who was looking for her? What danger did being with that man and that unknown world represent for her? She, who had always been invisible to many, now felt hundreds of eyes on her, waiting for her next move. Meanwhile, the man revealed part of the story without telling it all. "My family won't see this kindly," he warned, "but there's something you need to know. Something that changes everything." Marta tried to smile, but tension sapped her strength. She needed more answers. And he seemed to have them, although the price for knowing would be high. The car turned onto a main avenue, illuminated by large bright billboards and imposing facades. Marta recognized the area but felt like a stranger in a world that had been invisible to her until that day. Then he lowered his voice, almost a whisper. "You were rejected because of how you look, but what you carry inside is what truly matters. Now I'm going to show you something. Just because I believe you deserve something better." The sparkle in his eyes couldn't be ignored, nor the question that immediately formed. Why her? Marta felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Was it a trap? A saving opportunity or a new obstacle? The night was just beginning and every second, every gesture, seemed charged with hidden meanings. The car stopped in front of a majestic building. He held out his hand. "Welcome to the other side," he said with an enigmatic smile. When Marta stepped out, the world she knew up to that moment began to crumble and at the same time open up before her. But it didn't do so without leaving clues, without leaving contradictory messages that pushed her to find out more, to fight against easy judgment and the appearances that had once excluded her. At that very moment, the true story was just beginning, and no one, not even Marta, knew where it would lead them. The city vibrated before her eyes, with its chaos and its glory, and Marta was right in the middle of that unexpected story. The echo of that initial rejection began to transform into something different, something that would make everyone who had judged her look twice. The question floating in the air was simple but devastating. Who was Marta really? And how far was she willing to go to answer it? Luxury, appearances, and destiny were more intertwined than ever, and she had just entered a labyrinth she didn't know if she could leave the same. But something inside her had changed forever. Because sometimes, what seems like a humiliating end is nothing more than the beginning of the story one was meant to tell. And Marta, although hurt and confused, was beginning to understand that that night held many surprises for her. Some bitter, others sweet, and all with a price she would have to pay. The engine roared again, and the game was just dealing its cards. What secrets would that night hide? Who would be allies? And who the executioners? One thing was certain. The truth was not on the surface, and Marta was about to discover how much what she carried inside was worth, beyond any label. Thus, among lights, gazes, and a destiny that seemed written in indelible ink, the night surprised with its first move. And the question was not whether Marta could change her path, but which path she would choose when luxury and exclusion collided irreparably. The chapter of that night was far from over, and in its shadows, the spark of a personal revolution began to set fire to what she thought impossible. Marta still didn't know why she was there, nor what tomorrow held, but she knew something inside her would never be the same again. And for the first time, the world would notice too. Just as the restaurant manager denied her entry, looking at her clothes as if they were an offense, she felt like the world was collapsing around her. It wasn't just the worn and simple garment she wore, but the contempt she read in his eyes. "You don't belong here." She froze for a moment, trying to understand what she could have done to deserve such extreme rejection, but the truth was there was nothing to explain. Her only fault was coming from a neighborhood where life doesn't offer second chances. She took a deep breath, not without casting one last fixed glance toward the interior of the brightly lit dining room, with impeccably set tables, where people seemed to float in another universe, one she would never be invited to. At that moment, a soft noise caught her attention. Looking down, she saw a shining reflection slowly emerging from the corner. A car unlike any she had ever seen before. A blue so dark it seemed to absorb light, with an aerodynamic design that looked like it was taken from a futuristic movie. But what truly chilled her blood was the person who stepped out with imposing elegance, as if his mere presence dictated the rules. No one in the restaurant dared to look away. Everyone fell silent. Who was that figure, and why was he waiting just for her? She turned slowly, unable to stop her heart from pounding in her chest. He, the man from the car, looked at her with a confident smile, the kind only someone used to having absolute control could show. Without a word, he made a gesture inviting her to come closer. For a moment, rejection and humiliation were trapped between confusion and disbelief. Why had the owner himself of that inaccessible world come to rescue her? What secrets did that mysterious man hide? And more importantly, why had he chosen her, a girl barely holding simple dreams in her hands, for a destiny that seemed written in much farther stars? She walked toward the car, each step a question exploding in her mind. In that moment, all labels, prejudices, and judgments disappeared. Only pure uncertainty remained. She wanted to ask who he was, what he expected from her, but her mouth dried up and the words got stuck. Perhaps that wasn't what mattered. Maybe she just had to let herself be carried away and discover the mystery with every kilometer that took them away from the place where she had been rejected. The man, saying nothing, opened the door and with a single gesture invited her inside. Used to being obeyed, he expected an immediate response, but in his eyes there was also a hint of curiosity. A strange and unpredictable path awaited her. The engine purred softly and the car began to glide slowly through the streets she knew so well, but which now seemed different, illuminated by a story just beginning to be written. She tried not to look in the rearview mirror, because in it, far behind, she saw the restaurant's entrance and with it, that humiliating sign from the doorman. What if all of that had simply been a mistake? A cruel twist of fate. Yet the reality was merciless. The door was closed to her inside. If she wanted something different, she had to give up the fight in that place and embark on a parallel universe. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, murmurs began to grow among the customers and employees. In a matter of seconds, the news had spread throughout the room. Did you see who was outside? Is it true he's the owner's son? And what is he doing with that poor girl? The looks that once scorned her now turned into surprise, disbelief, and a little fear. Because in high society, where every gesture carries meaning, that unforeseen act broke all the rules. That poor girl had suddenly gone from being an invisible shadow to being the center of a storm of whispers and speculation. Was she someone who knew that world better than she seemed? Or was she just a whim of a bored millionaire? She, sitting in the passenger seat, could hardly understand what was happening. In the dimness of that luxury car, there was much more than mere resistance to rejection. There was a veiled promise, an unsolved enigma reflected in the driver's elusive smile. What did he want from her? Just fun? Or was there really something worthwhile behind that relentless appearance? She gently clenched her hands, feeling something awaken inside her, a mixture of fear and hope that prepared her for everything that was yet to come. The man, named Alejandro, was no ordinary stranger. His surname was synonymous with power and control, but his life was marked by secrets and decisions only he knew deeply. Ignoring the luxury surrounding him, his gaze settled on her with the seriousness of someone who knew he had found in an instant the missing piece to complete a too complicated puzzle. He had witnessed the rejection, the disdain of the doorman, and that moment had served as a revelation. She was not just any woman in old clothes. She was someone special, someone who, even without knowing it, was about to radically change both her own life and his. The following minutes were a whirlwind of unanswered questions. She did not dare to ask any more, only allowed herself to feel the rhythm of the engine, the invisible weight of that enigma surrounding her. Cold sweat ran down her back, but something inside told her maybe, just maybe, that apparent rejection was not the end, but the beginning of a story that would shake her to the core. The city outside the window began to change. The tall buildings and loud noise gave way to quieter areas, almost unreal to her. It was as if they were entering a parallel world, one that didn't appear in her dreams because she never dared to imagine it. As Alejandro drove skillfully, his mind reviewed every detail of the encounter, every gesture of that young woman silently sitting beside him. Something inside her caught his attention, an invisible force challenging him every second. He wasn't interested in the superficiality of money nor the appearance of the people who surrounded him daily. She seemed to carry a raw and authentic truth that others had forgotten. Perhaps that was why he had waited outside, to show that in a world where fake smiles dominate, sincerity can be a much stronger form of power. The city skyline disappeared behind green hills and tree-lined roads, a stark contrast to the cold opulence of the restaurant. She didn't say a word, but in her eyes there was a spark Alejandro didn't miss, a mix of fear, surprise, and doubtful hope. Would she be able to face everything destiny had in store for her? Could she break free from the invisible chains of rejection to embrace a future she had never even dreamed of? As they crossed that almost magical landscape, tension grew, questions multiplied, and the story was only beginning to spread its wings. In the back seat, a discreet leather suitcase waited silently, holding secrets that would change everything. Alejandro looked at it, then at her. The moment had come. There was no turning back, no room for regret. What would happen next would not only define who she was but also redefine a world where often courage is measured solely by appearances. At that instant, the line between humility and power was put in check, and the most important question hung in the air. Was she ready to cross it? And just when he thought the story couldn't get any more unexpected, when silence seemed to envelop them like a thick blanket, Alejandro broke the ice with a phrase that made her almost let out a stifled scream. I need you to trust me, even if you don't understand anything. Tonight will change your life forever. Would it be a sweet tale or a disguised nightmare? The answer lay in every kilometer traveled and in every accelerated heartbeat she now carried. No one, not even the cold doorman who humiliated her, could imagine the magnitude of what that simple appearance at the door of a luxury restaurant was about to unleash. The girl felt the rejection burning on her skin, colder than the restaurant's air conditioning. The woman who had ignored her, the hostess in an impeccable dress and forced smile, gave her a gesture that left no room for doubt. Not here, not today. With these clothes we can't seat you, she said in a polite but firm voice, as if saying she was a problem, not a person. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, each drop hitting the ground as fast as the girl's heart was pounding inside. It wasn't just a denied invitation but a disdain disguised as protocol, a cruel reminder that not all worlds are meant to mix. She walked toward the exit with her head down, avoiding the looks that now pierced her, full of judgment and mockery. Each step felt like an echo of failure. The long, bright hallway lights seemed to enlarge the shadow of her tired face. At that moment, she thought of all the sacrifices she had made to get there, the night jobs to pay for her English classes, the smile she had practiced in the mirror to give hope to her family. And that was what she received. A slammed door disguised as an excuse. "You're not enough," said the heavy silence behind the door that was now closing on her. But just as despair threatened to consume her, her gaze lifted to the back door of the restaurant, which opened just a little to let out a whisper of the outside world. And there, under the rain that soaked her simple dress and worn shoes, a black car appeared like a lightning bolt in the night. It wasn't just any car. It was a Maserati, a model shining with the pomp she had only seen in magazines, movies, in dreams that seemed forbidden. The engine roared like a latent beast, and the raindrops on its hood reflected the neon lights of the city with flashes of unexpected magic. The driver, a man in an impeccable suit and serene face, stepped out of the vehicle without hurry. He looked at the girl with a mix of recognition and admiration that she could barely understand. Her heart, which moments before had tightened with rejection, now began to beat with a different strength, a mixture of surprise, hope, and above all, curiosity. Who could be waiting for her there? Why would someone like that be looking for her? Was it, perhaps, a sign that the world did hold secrets for her? The sound of approaching footsteps stirred a whirlwind of questions inside her. At that moment, the restaurant manager, who until then had seemed indifferent, came out the main door. His expression changed instantly, from disdain to bewilderment. He looked at the luxury car, then at the girl, but said nothing. Everything in that loaded silence spoke louder than 1,000 explanations. The scene became a magnet for other diners and employees, who began peeking behind curtains and windows to discover who this young woman was, one who had minutes before been ignored because of her appearance but now seemed to have the universe at her feet. Still soaked, the girl took a deep breath. She knew her story didn't end there. Her life was about to take a turn no one could have expected. And just as she was about to let herself be carried away by confusion, the man in the suit called her with a confident yet gentle voice. "Ready to go?" She nodded, trying to process every image, every feeling. Almost as if it were a dream, she opened the Maserati door and settled inside, while the sound of the engine starting and the restaurant fading behind her, small and forgotten, like a stage left behind. But what she didn't know was that that afternoon would not only change her destiny but begin breaking down invisible walls, challenging deep-rooted prejudices, and writing a story with twists she had never imagined in her dreams. The question now orbiting everyone's mind was simple. Who really was this girl, and what secret did she hold? Because the luxury waiting outside was not just a status symbol but the key to an unexpected past and a future nobody had anticipated. As the car drove away through the bright streets under the rain, the girl felt a mix of nerves and excitement envelop her. She looked out the window, watching the blurry lights and the reflection of her own face, as if for the first time she could recognize herself not only on the surface but deep within. Was this her chance to redefine who she was, to show the world there was much more beyond the cheap clothes and the appearances the restaurant had judged? Her gaze faded into the darkness, where every shadow seemed to promise answers that only time would reveal. Back in the restaurant, the atmosphere had changed. The usual murmur of the room had turned into expectant silence, as if everyone felt they had witnessed something forcing them to rethink their ideas and prejudices. The manager returned inside with slow steps, but this time without the arrogance that had marked him before. Something had hung in the air, and no one yet knew if it would be a clash, a liberation, or the start of a silent revolution in that world that seemed so far from the girl's reality. Meanwhile, in the luxury car seat, the young woman began to discover that her story was about to be told from another place, with other protagonists and hidden truths. But there was still much to uncover. What connected her to that man? What darkness or light did her past hide? And, more importantly, how would she face the future after having been rejected a second time over something as superficial as what she was wearing? The truth was that that night would only be the beginning of a long journey, full of unanswered questions and unexpected surprises. The clothes had been just an excuse for a rejection that had pushed her toward a far more complex and fascinating reality. A reality that would prove that appearances, although powerful, do not always dictate destiny. And that sometimes, just when one thinks all is lost, a luxury car appears, and the world turns upside down, transforming a moment of pain into an opportunity for a new life. But would the girl be ready for what was coming? Could she accept that her life was about to change forever, and not necessarily in the way she expected? The rain kept falling, now less intensely, as the Maserati disappeared into the horizon lit by the city's lights. The girl, with a mix of fear and excitement, knew nothing would ever be the same again. And although she didn't fully understand what awaited her, one thought firmly crossed her mind. This rejection at the restaurant was not an end but a gateway to something much bigger. And looking ahead, she felt that, for the first time, the real story was only just beginning. Still with her gaze fixed on the restaurant table, where the waitress had rejected her without even properly looking her in the eyes, Mariana felt her cheeks burn from that mix of embarrassment and contained anger. Seriously, the clothes. People get so caught up in appearances that they are capable of judging someone who only wanted to enjoy a quiet dinner. However, her curiosity was stronger than any negative feeling. She wanted to look around and see if anyone else had noticed that unfair attitude from the restaurant, that invisible door that seemed to slam shut the moment they saw her. But no one seemed to pay attention, except for a few stifled sighs and some glances that were a bit more direct and curious. Still, that didn't stop her. She decided it wasn't a time to cry or freeze. She stood up with determination, gathered her things and turned around, resisting letting that place define her. Her heart beat fast, not only from frustration but because something inside her told her this couldn't be the end. And just as she took the first step toward the exit, the door suddenly swung open, letting in a soft cold breeze that tousled her hair, but also, and this was what caught her most, a peculiar sound. The unmistakable purr of an engine, a sound that seemed impossible in a place like that, or perhaps too obvious for a moment like this. Mariana paused, not quite sure what to expect. She took a few steps forward, and curiosity overcame any resentment. Outside, right on the sidewalk, a pristine black car, one of those you only see in movies, was waiting. Not just any car, nor a regular model, but a luxury vehicle that seemed to shine with its own light under the street lamps. Its aerodynamic lines, shiny chrome, and the exclusive aura it radiated made everyone around turn their faces to look. The security cameras captured that moment as if it were a music video. The people inside the restaurant, who minutes before had ignored or rejected her, now turned their heads toward Mariana. Not because she was the center of attention, but because someone like her being there with a car like that was reason enough to create an unexpected stir. Who could that girl be? The same one they had just condemned for not fitting in. Suddenly, the well-dressed group of young men who had been chatting scornfully at the bar now looked at her with surprise and secret respect. The cooks and waitresses peeked through the windows, and even the doorman of the place stood frozen, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. Without losing her composure, which was her trademark, Mariana approached the vehicle with a firm step. The door opened, and a figure stepped out with a calm smile, as if this scene were ordinary to him. A man with an elegant appearance, but without the typical arrogance of wealthy people. He rather seemed confident, someone with purpose. He carried himself like someone who commands without raising his voice, and the instant he saw her, his expression changed to a mix of pride and tenderness. She returned his gaze, and there, amid the crowd and the noise of engines and whispers, a story much more complex than anyone could imagine began to unfold. How was it possible that someone with that level of luxury and power was waiting just for her? What connection did that humble woman have with that confident and successful man? Imagination began to run wild among those witnessing the scene. Could he be a famous businessman who had seen something special in her? Or an old love who recognized her despite everything? The looks from people on the street started to multiply, and the rumor began to spread quickly. That girl is not what she seemed. There's more behind her story. Mariana, aware of the harsh looks she had received moments before and now the admiration and curiosity, simply got into the car without saying a word. As the door closed behind her, an almost reverential silence settled over the place. Burned by surprise, everyone remained wondering what kind of story lay behind those two people, what secrets that unexpected duo held. The waitress who had rejected her no longer knew what to think because the script she had followed was shattered before her eyes. Her prejudice had collided with a wider world, with realities that transcend clothing or temporary status. The car started smoothly, and amid whispers and furtive glances, the murmured chorus blossomed. "Who is that girl?" The tension did not dissipate. On the contrary, it multiplied. Because now people not only wanted to know who was waiting for her outside but why the initial discrimination, what secrets they both hid. The scene created doors to endless possibilities. Was this just a coincidence or the beginning of an unexpected turn in Mariana's life? Would the world discover what even she didn't know was taking shape? Mariana leaned back in the leather seat as the car began to move slowly down the street. Beside her, the man who seemed pulled from a modern dream fastened his seatbelt, not without sending her a look that said, "This is just the beginning." And at that moment, the most surprising thing was that she felt every step she had taken that night, every rejection, every arrogant glance, had been a rung on a ladder leading to something much greater. Something that would change her destiny forever. But the mystery was not only in the relationship between that man and her. No, the mystery was deeper. Why had they rejected her so decisively? Was there more behind that discrimination than just a matter of clothing? And above all, what role would now that luxury car, that elegant man, and the unexpected attention play in a story that seemed just beginning to reveal itself? As the car drove away from the scene, leaving behind the restaurant, its lights, and the shadows of the night, a question lingered in the air. What if that rejection had not been a mistake or a simple prejudice, but a test? A test for something greater that no one could yet imagine. Mariana's life could take a radical turn in just seconds, and all those who had underestimated her were about to discover that you should never judge a book by its cover, nor a girl by her clothes. Because sometimes, true luxury lies in the story behind and in the people we choose to wait for at the door. And while the city lights flashed past quickly, the car's engine kept that constant mysterious hum, as if announcing that the best was yet to come. What will come next? What secrets will that man reveal? And what decision will Mariana make when the whole world watches her again? The story was far from over, and every minute, every second, could be a new chapter to discover. She left the restaurant. Laura felt all eyes fixed on her, whispers and quiet laughter that terrified her, but the worst was yet to come. The revolving door spat her out like an intruder, as if her simple dress and worn backpack were a crime. She walked with her head down, feeling that so many hours of saving, so many sacrifices, all crumbled in seconds. However, just as she was about to disappear into the darkest corner, there it was. A car that looked like it had come out of a movie, shiny, spotless, with the windows slightly open, revealing a luxurious interior that seemed to guard a secret. People froze, whispering, tortured by curiosity. Who was the person waiting for Laura? Because it wasn't a stranger or an accident. The image of that vehicle starkly contrasted with the reality of the girl who had dared to enter a world where no one expected to see her. And then, as if the tension had been too heavy for the night, the car made a gesture. The window slowly rolled down and an elegant hand appeared, with a ring that caught the light from the street lamp. The voice that came out was soft but firm, with an accent that left no doubt. "Laura, what are you still doing there? Don't you see I'm waiting for you? Come on, get in." Everything inside her stirred. Was that the man the high society whispered about in the most exclusive salons? The same one who had been at the other table, dressed in his expensive suit, watching from afar? Her fingers trembled, uncertainty battled hope, and the car waited with the door open, like a promise impossible to ignore. As she approached the vehicle, everyone's eyes followed her, but this time with a mix of surprise and respect. Where had that bond come from? Was it a coincidence or a story they didn't know? In silence, Laura paused for a moment and looked back toward the lit dining room where they had rejected her. It wasn't just her clothes that excluded her. It was a barrier of prejudice that seemed impermeable. However, that moment out of place made all certainties shake. She got into the car with a mixture of fear and clenched teeth. The door closed with a firm click, and the engine purred elegantly as the city lights began to fade into the night. As the vehicle started, Laura couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. Why had he waited for her? Was it a gesture of compassion, connection, or a strategy to dazzle and then disappoint? The silence between them seemed heavy, the tension palpable. The man didn't say much, but his eyes spoke. There was much more beneath that smooth, shiny surface. When he finally broke the silence, the words were not what Laura expected. With a smile that didn't quite reach sincerity, he confessed that he had been watching her all night, that he knew who she really was and that he wanted to offer her an opportunity. But there was a condition that would completely change everything Laura had dreamed of. She swallowed hard, gripping the seatbelt tightly. She knew this night was not ordinary. Everything seemed to be turning toward something far beyond rejection or a fancy car. There were doors that didn't open the same way for everyone, and those doors held secrets behind them, secrets that Laura needed to delve into to discover if the price they asked was worth paying. Could she keep her essence amidst so much wealth and falseness? That question burned her skin as the car moved toward a future that no one, not even her, could imagine. And just when she thought everything was settled, the man let slip a revelation that threw her back into a whirlwind. They knew each other from before, long before that night. It was a hidden connection, buried under years of distance and silence, and everything Laura believed was about to change. The mystery was unfolding, and with it, a new tension, a story more complex and fascinating than any garment or social status. And so, the night was only beginning. She could hardly believe what had just happened. The doorman, with that haughty expression, shook his head while casting a glance up and down at her worn-out clothes. "I'm sorry, it's not allowed," was all she heard before feeling every gaze in the restaurant's luxurious lobby settle on her. Humiliation gripped her chest. She thought she just wanted to enjoy a peaceful dinner, but that small yet significant wall of prejudice stopped her without further explanation. And despite that, she wouldn't leave without something more happening, without her story changing forever. She continued walking toward the exit with firm steps, although her heart wavered between anger and sadness. Her torn dress and worn shoes contrasted with the glamour she left behind, like a forgotten relic in a world that seemed to have no place for people like her. She wanted to avoid the stares, but it was impossible. A growing murmur rose among the wealthy patrons watching her pass. Some whispered, others simply looked away awkwardly, unsure of what to think. Why was that young woman rejected? What was she doing here in those clothes? Doesn't she have anywhere else to go? Opening the door to step out into the cold night, her chest tightened as it closed behind her, leaving only the distant sound of glasses clinking inside. The darkness seemed to wrap itself in an absurd silence, but then a different noise broke the monotony. The echo of a deep, sleek engine. She turned her head slowly, and there it was. A black car, gleaming under the street lamps, parked right at the entrance. The body shone like a mirror, and the LED lights glowed with a soft blue halo. She knew that car wasn't for just anyone, much less for someone like her, or at least she thought so. The door opened, and an outstretched hand silently invited her in. Her breathing quickened, trying to understand if this luxury was real or the start of a cruel joke. But on the other side, the person waiting looked at her with a warm smile, free of judgment or doubt. He wore an impeccable suit, but there was a familiar spark in his eyes. The simple, ordinary girl who had been rejected minutes before now had beside her someone who seemed to have stepped out of her deepest dreams. He broke the silence. "You don't deserve to be treated like that. Come on, let's change this night," he said with a firm, confident voice, full of complicity. Those words were like an unexpected balm against the dampness of that humiliation. Confusion left her mute, but inside, 1,000 questions began to bloom. Who was this man? Why was he waiting for her there? Would what was coming be a genuine change or just the calm before the next storm? As she delicately got into the leather seat, the engine came to life and the atmosphere changed completely. Outside, the restaurant lights turned their backs, but she was no longer alone with her story. Who would have imagined that that night, which had seemed so ordinary and cruel at first, would take such an unexpected turn? As the car drove forward, the street unfolded before her like a promise, and on her face, caught between doubt and hope, appeared a smile no one expected. The passengers inside the car barely spoke, but the air was charged with a gentle tension, as if every second was preparing them both for the revelation to come. She looked out the window at the illuminated city that seemed unaware of her problems and thought, why did he choose to wait for me? What made me so special? Her mind raced toward memories she thought forgotten, small details, invisible clues that perhaps now made sense. The silence broke when the man looked at her with a deep, understanding gaze. "I don't judge you by what you're wearing. I know what you're capable of, so much greater than you imagine." Those words made her heart beat forcefully. Simple words, but carrying the weight of many untold stories. She swallowed, trying not to show the held-back emotion threatening to overflow. They arrived at a tall, shining building, very different from the cold restaurant where she had been rejected. This was a new world of glass and modern design, where elegance was not just a facade but a way of life. Getting out of the car, a young assistant approached with a flawless smile. "Welcome, miss. Everything is ready for you," she said kindly but measuredly, as if caring for every detail was essential. They didn't just want to give her a chance, they wanted her to shine fully. As they walked toward the elevator, the girl noticed how people stepped aside to look at her in amazement. She was no longer that humble young woman ignored before. Now her presence exuded a quiet authority that needed no explanation. But the question kept lingering in her mind. How had her fate changed so quickly? What secret did that man in the suit hold who had rescued her from indifference? They ascended to a penthouse that looked like something out of a movie. The space was large, bathed in warm lights, with minimalist furniture and a spectacular view of the city that never slept. However, what caught her attention most was a huge mirror on the wall. "Look at yourself," the man said as she approached, trembling. In her reflection, the girl in old clothes with the lost look from the restaurant was no longer there. There was someone new, someone who could conquer anything. Suddenly, he handed her an elegant bag with clothes and accessories. "This is your armor so the world can see you for who you really are," he said. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside were garments that seemed designed for a star, not for a girl who simply wanted a quiet dinner. But in that moment understand it wasn't the dress or the shoes that mattered. It was the message. That courage isn't in the clothes, but in who you are beneath that facade. As she tried on the dress, every mirror around her reflected her transformation, not only physical but emotional. A wave of power swept over her, mixed with a touch of fear for the unknown. Will I be able? She wondered. But even in doubt, one thing was clear. She had begun a path that no one, not even herself, could have anticipated. And amid all this metamorphosis, he remained silent, watching her with patience and admiration. He had plans, big plans, and now she was part of them, although she still didn't fully understand what role she would play in that story. However, that night, that door opening to a different world was not just an end. It was a new beginning. The mystery was alive. Who was that man, really? What were his intentions? And what story did they share without words? The pieces were beginning to fit together, but the truth, my friend, was waiting just at the end of the road, ready to surprise them all. The young woman who had been rejected minutes before now held in her hands something that cannot be bought or given, something that is only obtained by facing prejudice and finding strength where no one sees it. And as the soft music of the penthouse began to fill the silence, fate prepared to reveal its true face. The clock moved forward, and with every tick, the tension grew. Because one thing is certain: when you think the worst is over, the universe has a habit of showing you that it's only the beginning. And on that night, when a simple rejection at a luxury restaurant seemed like the end, reality was barely revealing its most intriguing side. Are you ready to see what happens when skin doesn't matter and the soul shines brighter than any jewel? The story doesn't end here, it's just gaining strength. Get ready, because what comes next will shatter all expectations and make you question everything you thought you knew about courage, appearance, and second chances. Because sometimes, the deepest marks are found exactly where you least expect them. The door of the luxury restaurant closed with a soft click just behind her, as if sealing a judgment that seemed irrevocable. Her footsteps echoed on the empty sidewalk, the sting of that rejection still burning in her chest. No one could have imagined that night would change everything. That place, with its crystal chandeliers and tables dressed in fine linen, had been an invisible wall that separated her not only from the banquet but from a reality she sensed but never expected to face. As she walked among the darkened lights of the boulevard, her mind replayed every look, every whisper that had dismissed her. Not suitable. She doesn't belong here, her outfit seemed to say, a statement loaded with prejudice that hurt more than any direct word. But then, just as the cold night air began to envelop her, a shadow appeared at the edge of her vision. Car. Not just any car, but an imposing, elegant vehicle that seemed straight out of a movie. The engine purred softly, almost imperceptibly, like a secret guardian of untold stories. Her heart quickened with a mix of curiosity and something she couldn't name. Who could be waiting for her there? As if they knew that rejection was only the prelude to something much greater. The car moved forward calmly, and from inside emerged a figure as out of place in that setting as she was. It was someone she had heard about, a person whose mere presence could change the fate of anyone by their side. That person, with a faint smile and steady gaze, looked her up and down without judging her dress or worn shoes. They saw only the woman who had been invisible minutes before. And with a gesture, they extended a hand as one offers a second chance, a new beginning. She hesitated, the weight of disbelief paralyzing her for a moment, but something in that invitation pushed her to get into the car. As the doors closed behind her, a murmur began to rise on the street. Witnesses to the scene didn't understand anything. Why had such a luxurious car come for her? Who knew her? The story that seemed doomed to a sad ending was, however, beginning to reveal unexpected shadows, secrets woven beneath the lights and prejudices, revelations that would open doors far bigger than those of the restaurant. Along the way, while the engine roared beneath the starry sky, her mind kept wondering what awaited her. Was it chance? Or a destiny she still couldn't name? The night unfolded like a blank book, and every mile traveled was a different chapter of her life. It wasn't just distance, it was a space moving her away from rejection and closer to a deeper truth, one that didn't fit on any luxury table or in any expensive dress. But this was only the beginning. Because looking out the window, with the city lights blurring in a dance of shadows and neon, she understood there was much more at stake. Not just her story, but an invisible web of secrets, power, and resistance that would only unravel step by step. And that night, in the shared silence with a mysterious driver, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Who was that person? What bond tied them beyond the moment? And what was she willing to discover and face to change her destiny? The door of the past had closed firmly, but on the other side of the tinted glass, a new world awaited. One where appearances could be deceiving and second chances were far stronger than any dress or prejudice. Her heart beat fiercely, for that night held in its folds a promise. Nothing and no one would stop her again. Or would they? It was time to find out. Just when the looks filled with contempt seemed like a clenched fist on her shoulders, She took a deep breath and decided not to let those gazes define her worth. She left the restaurant with steady steps, feeling how the whispers and sighs stuck behind her. No one imagined what awaited her outside. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, a luxury car, as imposing as it was unexpected, awaited her with the engine running and the doors open as if inviting her into a world completely different from the one she had just left behind. Open mouths, frozen surprises, everything exploded inside in a silence that was both admiration and a bit of guilt. Who would have thought that this young woman, rejected without even being known, would be accompanied by someone so different and powerful? The scene was about to change for all those who had underestimated her. But what hidden connection lay behind that luxurious vehicle and the young woman in simple clothes? And why did she seem so calm, as if that car and its occupant were a natural part of her story? It was not the end. It was barely the beginning of a much more complex and exciting story than any superficial judgment based on appearance. For the first time, someone wrote a silent and firm lesson, and the clock was just beginning to tick.